Hello and welcome to this video, which is a portion of the annual report for Abingdon Episcopal Church for the year 2020. Throughout the year 2020, as we faced pandemic, we focused on being community. This series of conversations are by members of our community as we focus on the ministries that we did. As we think back to when the church was founded, as we read in the book of Acts, there are many characteristics which define the church. As we find ourselves in a new situation, we too had to ask ourselves, what are we being as we learn to be the church? As the early church did, they had to learn. As we have had to do in this pandemic, we have had to learn. I hope you'll enjoy this conversation with members of Abingdon Church as we explore how we learned and affirmed our opportunity to be the church God has called us to be. We're having a conversation about how Abingdon Church has been reaching out and caring for the community. We read in the book of Acts that when the church was gathered, one of the things they did was care for the widows, the orphans, the hungry, the needy. And in 2020, we still had that same requirement to be the church. So we're in a conversation now to think about how Abingdon was the church as far as caring for people, the wider community in 2020. And I'm just going to start off this from a connection to a conversation that's found somewhere else with our finances and stewardship conversation. In that one, Hugh Bryan pointed out that one of the things we saw was an uptick in designated offerings for outreach and for our first Sunday offerings, as well as our second helping Sundays support Bread for Life food pantry. And so in that, we support things like Literacy Volunteers of Gloucester. We supported the Humane Society. We did a collection for our Angel Tree programs and for other things through that. And the congregation was very generous in doing that. But I want to go back to when we began 2020, several months ago, and the COVID was just hitting us. One of the sort of first thing we did in the pandemic was support the guest ministry. And we had supported them by housing them earlier in their program season. But then we were called upon to do that. Diane, can you tell us about what that was like for us?
It was very difficult. We would normally house the clients in a church, and someone from the church or from the community would bring them a meal. Well, since COVID hit, you couldn't do the homemade meals. So we had to go to restaurants and get meals from them. Some of the restaurants donated. Sometimes someone would actually buy the meals. Some of the churches would donate the restaurant meals, but we had to go do that. We also had to spread the people out more, the clients out more. We had to have a lot of sanitation. Everybody had to sanitize every night instead of just the one time at the end of the week. So it was rather difficult. And this year we've had to do things a little different. Instead of the churches housing the clients in the evenings or during the night, where the guest program is renting motels for them. We've gotten grants, but we still have to feed them in the evening. We have approximately 23 rooms that we're renting right now with 40 clients in them.
That's a lot. It's been one of those things where in that program, we always like to have volunteers involved. And because of the distancing, we've reduced the number of volunteers that we could have engaged in that ministry.
Correct. And people can still volunteer to help feed them. And the website for guests, there is a sign up Genius, so you can actually still provide meals for the clients.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll get that word out. Michelle, you coordinate the Panther Pack program. Of course, we've had to do that a lot differently this year as well. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so obviously when coronavirus hit, there was a couple of things that happened. First, the schools shut down. So um, the children are anonymous. We don't know who they are. It's not like we can take these now to their homes. And then we also had the additional issue of, I remember bringing food in, and then we waited 2 days, and then somebody came in and sorted, and then we waited 2 days because we didn't want to have any contamination to each other. So it was a little odd in the beginning, but truly we were not delivering any food at all for a very long time. So I think it was in June, maybe, we joined forces actually with Kathy Phillips from our church with the Royal Infant Services Program. She had social services representatives that were going to homes, and some of them were overlapping with the Abingdon students, some of them were not, but we were still able to assist people who needed it the most, who had financial issues and food issues. And many of them were our Abingdon kids. So that was a nice blending of a couple of organizations there. I was so grateful for her to have that. And instead of doing something on a weekly basis, what we did was we filled up boxes that would maybe help a family for a month. So we did one delivery in a month, and we did that in June, July, and August. So that took us through the summer months, which was great with that organization delivering. And then school started again. And well, let me just backtrack and say that during this entire time frame, the food banks were barren. There really wasn't any food. So the fact that our congregation was bringing in food, I'm sure was helpful specifically to Bread for Life. But no matter where that food was coming from and going to, it was all part of that larger effort to make sure that our community had food in their homes. Mm-hmm. So once the school year started, we still had a small, they weren't really coming into the school and picking up food. It was still a disjointed situation. And of all the students, only 2 people were actually asking for the food. But then the transportation department at the elementary school and the school system figured out a way for the buses to deliver the food, even to those kids that were doing it virtually or whatever the reasons were. And so we were able to start packing for 35 kids. So we have 35 students right now who receive food every week. For me, one of the other things that was hugely different is because, one, there was no food at the food bank, but so I was having to purchase a lot of it this year from Costco. About Thanksgiving of this past year, we started getting a lot more food from the food bank, which was great. But without the congregation packing, that it's harder. I mean, I think that I understand why people would not want to. You're touching a lot of the same things. You're back and forth. It can be overwhelming, especially if you're concerned about the coronavirus. But we've managed. We're doing really well, and I'm looking forward to having the chance for everybody to come together and do that collaboratively in the future. And of course, if anybody is comfortable, I'm always happy to have some help, because we're still packing. Because we have 35 students now, we probably can only do about 4 weeks at a time, but it is helpful to do a full 4 weeks, have them in the pantry, and know that we can get those delivered on a weekly basis. Instead of delivering them on Thursdays and Fridays now, we deliver them on Mondays, because that's when the transportation guys pick them up and deliver them throughout the week. So I'm trying to think if there's anything.
Well, I'll just jump in.
We overcame the obstacles. I think the people who needed it got it.
Yeah. Well, and one of the challenges we've had for years is we know that hunger doesn't end when the school year ends. Mm-hmm. And so we have tried different things over the years to have a feeding program at the school, to have some kind of coordination with Bread for Life. And this was probably the best summer feeding program we've ever had, because we partnered with RISP and we were able to coordinate. It was a slightly different population, but because the coordinator at Abingdon School and the coordinator at RISP were able to share their client lists and we don't know who they are, but they could look for overlaps and see needs as well.
Yeah, that was actually pretty exciting for me, because you're right. We've been for years trying to figure out how we can do that during the summer. And so, you know, in the adversity of coronavirus, we found a solution that maybe we can do in the future as well.
Yeah, yeah. Lots of changes.
But still successful. I don't think we ever missed a beat, really. We kept it going. So
yeah. And sometimes, and Michelle, you do a lot with all that, and sometimes it amazes me how little things make a big difference. Like one of the things that's made a huge difference was that several years ago, the building committee put a keypad on the door of the ramp. Having that keypad, now I sometimes joke there are probably 2 people in the county that don't have a key to our parish house, but with the keypad, when the social workers had to come in, they could just use a keypad and come and pick up that month worth of groceries before they went to see a family. And so it really was opening up the church physically so that our heart and work could be opened up as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just rethinking ways and seeing what opportunities we have. And that makes me think of all the work we did with something you had up, Pam. I mean, rethinking how we do things and opening
Well, and I'm also thinking about how these new partnerships have formed. And I think one of the things that was, for me, very exciting about Thanksgiving this year was that we continued, this is Abingdon's Thanksgiving community meal, but it opened up to, you know, we partnered with the Lighthouse Church. So what happened is that COVID created a greater need. Businesses shut down, people lost their job. There were more people who were in need. It also created, as Michelle said, there were fewer people who were really comfortable volunteering in person. But we estimated that we were probably going to need to serve around 600 people. And typically we'd been feeding 250 with our Meals on Wheels, 275 people at Thanksgiving. But we anticipated a much larger number, and we knew that they couldn't come into the parish hall. So how are we going to do this? Is it a drive-through? How is it going to happen? It was really a thrilling thing to watch God take all these things that look like problems and say, well, no, it's going to be okay, because people who weren't willing, who weren't comfortable volunteering in person were very comfortable supplying food. And by that time in the year, guidance had come down that it's okay to serve homemade food. It's less about contact and more about particles in the air, right? So it's okay to touch things. We're more, and again, we were okay with the food. So we had more people giving us food, which is good because that's what we needed. And then we had community people. We had CERT come in to help with traffic, and they didn't just help with traffic. The people that came in helped in other ways too. We had scouts come in and help us. We partnered with the Lighthouse Church. And then we had our own lovely volunteers, and a few people just from the community came in to say, how can I help? So it was really a wonderful experience. And just real quickly, and by the way, it was Michelle's Panther Pack system of how she's got this, this lineup of how things are packed. I took that and used it as our model for how we would pack food, because we packed meals individually and distributed them. And I couldn't work out how that was going to work until I got to volunteer with Michelle packing one day. And so like that just solved that problem. So all these things that were, how on earth is this going to work? It just worked out. It worked out so well. It was amazing to see the number of volunteers we had, because we had 2 sites. We had people volunteering at Abingdon and people volunteering at the Lighthouse. All the things that we needed. It was perfect. It was an amazing experience.
it's been a learning year. What we knew about the pandemic, about COVID, changed numerous times, as y'all alluded to. Like, can you get it from touching something? Can you get it from breathing something? So all those things we've just had to learn and learn over again. And some things we haven't been able to do. Like one thing we have done for several years is Meals on Wheels. The Bay Aging, which runs Meals on Wheels, this year decided, based on what they were doing, they had changed up all of how they were doing that. So they didn't have us involved for their holidays. And so, we're ready to pick that back up and start going again. The Red Cross, we still had blood drives. Like as we were looking at that, we thought, if the Red Cross doesn't know how to avoid COVID, we're all in trouble. And so they came in and did blood drives. We a lot of times do things with Cary Avenue Home. We did not do the parties that we have done in the past, again, because of proximity and social distancing and keeping ourselves and the residents safe. But we did an angel tree for Cary Avenue Home, giving everyone there a warm set of pajamas or a bathrobe or something. And that was on top of the angel tree we did for all the Salvation Army families, that we are one of the largest providers in that. And I'm sure there are, if y'all think of something, just chime in, or if you were part of any of those things, you can say how that was a part of what your discipleship, your understanding of church is. One of the things that we remember from our Anglican theology, distinct from our Christian theology, not unique, but distinct, is that we believe that God gave us this little piece of earth to care for all the souls who are here, whether they're Episcopal or Baptist or Buddhist or nuns or whatever. And part of our outreach is how we live into that. We never ask people, do you know who Jesus is? If you're hungry, you get a meal. That's what we're caring about. And by doing those works, we think people will come to know what that living God is. And I'm on the verge of preaching now, so I'm going to stop and see what y'all want to say.
I will tell you that with the Thanksgiving meal dinner, the person that picked the meals up for the guest clients was really impressed with the way it was run. And with the Panther packs, when I have delivered them to the school, and they were just so impressed and happy the way things were going with that also.
Thanks, Diane.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that feedback from the outside of things. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I always wonder when I'm delivering food, how many of those people how many people besides who we're helping are out there that either don't know that they have this resource or are afraid to say that they need something. And you talked about the housing scenarios, and maybe there's that moratorium right now that's helping people out, and how much is that going to change in the upcoming months potentially, and how are those people going to get the help that they need? And I don't know, as far as what we're doing in the church, I think we do quite a bit. I guess I would wonder, is there a way for us to let the community know that there may be something we're not doing right now, and all they have to do is ask, and maybe we would be able to do that too. So, I don't know how to do that, but I leave that to you, Sven.
Well, go ahead, Pam or Diane.
Go ahead, Pam.
I was just going to say, as a fairly new member of Abingdon, to your point, Michelle, I am amazed by how much the membership cares and reaches in, that the enthusiasm and energy that I see from the members in terms of serving the community and the people in the community. It's just been a real joy to be a part of that and witness it.
And for that point, I will say that doing this little video right now, I hope that people will watch it, because I don't know especially when you're in a coronavirus environment where you're sitting at home doing the services from your TV, that you can really feel that sense of pride and community for the things that we're able to do, and should be happy that we're doing that, because it's not there's 3 of us, 4, on here, but there's a whole church supporting just those 3 things, not to mention what the vestry does and all of those other committees. So I hope that this video actually gives everybody an opportunity to feel invested and proud of what we're able to do as a church. So
Yeah.
It makes me think Abingdon Church is alive and well in spite of Corona.
Yeah.
Yeah. Diane, do you want to get the last word in before we wrap it up?
I'm just really happy with the way that the church has continued to support the community with coronavirus, even though we can't meet as a congregation in person, we're still a community.
Mhm.
Yeah, and a community that cares for community, as God has entrusted us to do that. Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for all you do to be part of the ministries of Abingdon Church, and thanks for making time for this conversation and just reflecting back on how we have been the church in this pandemic and done the work that God has called us to do. Thank you all.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this conversation with members of Abingdon Church as we've explored how the church has been the church in 2020. There are a series of 8 videos that comprise this annual report. Hope you'll watch them all. And please join us for worship, service, and faith. Abingdon Church.